Good morning, everyone. Hi. Seeing some friends. It's so great to see all of you today. If you didn't know, it's the first day of spring. For me, that's a really big deal. I love springtime. So happy spring, everybody. Today, despite what was announced in the email, I'm not going to be talking about sibling relationship. I am going to go back to the parent-child relationship. And we did talk about this relationship earlier in our series, but that was more of from the perspective of the child, trying to reconnect and restore relationship with parents. And today I want to look at the parent-child relationship more from the perspective of the parent and what is the heart of the parent, what is the role and responsibility of the parent. So I'm going to start with a few quotes. The first one is from the Bible, from Deuteronomy. "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children." You know what? I missed the first line of it. So the first line of this quote actually says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." The rest of it doesn't really make sense without that. So, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. So the message that I get from this is, there's many commandments throughout the Bible, and in the Old Testament there's hundreds of laws about every aspect of life, down to what you can eat and when. And then we have the 10 Commandments. But this is the big one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So I think what this is saying is that to live this commandment and to share it, especially with our family and with our children, is kind of the most important thing that we can do in our life. Rick Warren talks about this quote, and he says this is actually very key. There's 3 times when children are very receptive to what parents have to say, or are a little bit more peaceful, or there's something that they can receive. And it's when you lie down, like before bedtime, and there's studies that say this too, the 3 minutes, if you spend 3 minutes before a child goes to sleep, and the first 3 minutes when they get up, and the first 3 minutes when they get home from school, these are like the 9 most important minutes in a child's day. And if you spend these minutes with intention, then there will be an impression. And so what are you going to share with them in these 3 minutes? So when you lie down and when you get up and when you walk along the road, this is probably when you're going to school or doing some task, right? Or when you sit at home, when you sit down to dinner also. These are important times. To love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So this is, I think, a biblical message to parents of what our role and job and responsibility is. But then in practicality, in real life, there's many complexities and there's a lot of nuances, and sometimes life gets busy. But nevertheless, it's important to have an idea of what is my role as a parent? I have the next couple of quotes I want to share are really about the heart of a parent, really like the depth that sometimes the Bible doesn't get to. So these are a couple of quotes from our founder, Reverend Moon. "Parents have the heart of wanting to give their children something better. This is why we cherish parental love. You should all know this. Parents give, and yet feel that it is not enough. They love, and yet feel as if there is some love they have not yet given and want to give more. And even after giving, they still feel unsatisfied with what they were able to give their children. This essence of parental love is then what connects us to eternal love. This is the original motivation for the beginning point of love. This is another one. Why is it that we love our children? Why is it that we cannot help loving them? Is it because loving our children is... it is because loving our children is like inheriting God's great work of creation on the substantial level. We are feeling the joy God felt after creating Adam and Eve. We are inheriting God's love and God's authority to create. So I think I shared a quote earlier in this series that the parental love it doesn't come from circumstances. It just wells up. It comes from, I think Reverend Moon said, it comes from your bone marrow. Most relationships we have come out of circumstances. We meet our husband or wife, we have friendships, we have coworkers, we have classmates, and they come into our life by happenstance or by somebody introducing us, or there's some circumstances by which we come in contact and love these people. But a child comes from us. You might have heard this saying that to have a child is to accept that a part of your heart will now be walking around outside of your body. The parental love is very unique in that it's not circumstantial. It comes from deep, deep, deep inside, and it is the most in resemblance to God's love because God is a parent. Here's another quote. No matter how incompetent or lacking parents may be, if one of their children suffers, the parent's heart are devastated to the point of breaking. If the situation is then resolved, the relief and joy are overwhelming in proportion to the original pain. If such is the heart of a fallen parent, what must be the heart of God? So I think for any of you who are already parents, I don't need to explain very much about this. We already know what that kind of love feels like. But I think it's an interesting point that even if we are incompetent, or if we have parents who are incompetent or lacking, this love is basically universal among all parents. Even parents who don't believe in God, even parents who came from difficult backgrounds, even parents who don't really know how to substantialize true love in all their relationships, there's still this connection of heart to their children that can never let go. Parents have an irrepressible desire to love their children, to do better for them, to create a good life for them. True Father talks so many times. The parental heart is to want their child to be better than they are. That's not usually the case in this world. Most people in the corporate world do not want anybody to get better than they are because then they'll take their job and they'll take their money. We're always striving to be the best at what we're doing so that we can be the best at what we're doing. But a parent doesn't think that way. I think a parent, even if they don't like to admit their difficulties or their struggles in the past or the problems that they have, a parent never wishes on their child to have those same difficulties or struggles. The parent always hopes and always wishes that their child will find more happiness and more joy and be more successful and find more love. So, what's interesting about this is this actually tells us something about God as well. Because anything that is true, any real love, originates in God. And so what this tells us about God is that actually God also wants us to be bettered. I think Reverend Moon is the first person to ever say this. It almost seems blasphemous, that God wants us to be better than him. And in our minds, we all go, I don't even know what to do with that. But nevertheless, God feels that way. Being a parent is the closest thing that we can experience to being like God, because God is a parent. So there's a potential for incredible love. If you have a child, you probably will never forget the moment that your first child was born, because that is a moment that you were born as a parent. And that is a moment when you touch something that is more godlike than maybe you ever experienced before. But at the same time, it's not an easy path to be a parent. People often ask me, what was it like having twins first? What was it like to have two babies at once? And there's a part of me that never even, I don't even want to think about it. I'd rather not recall some of those memories. The waking up 10 times a night with twins, and they cried a lot, and I'm going to stop there. But at the same time, it was the most amazing and most wonderful experience. But it's so hard. As a parent, you give everything of yourself. You first learn what it means to give everything. If you were to apply for a job at a company and you were to sit down for an interview, and then the interviewer would be like, all right, so we've got this awesome job lined up for you. You'll need to wake up at least 5 times every night, including on weekends. You're going to gain a lot of weight. You're not going to actually get a full night's sleep for 10 years at least. We're actually going to make sure that we interrupt every conversation that you try to have for the rest of your life. We're going to disrupt your sex life. If you went to a job interview and they started listing these job requirements, you'd probably just get up and leave. No amount of money would make you want to take that job, right? I'm not working for this company. And yet, we go through it willingly with our own children. This is experiencing God's love. I'm not big on technology, but I do like Google Photos. Every day, it shows me memories of what happened on that day and previous years. And so I'll go back, 3 years, and Annalise was just a little toddler, and then it'll show me a memory from 10 years ago, and Mia was just learning how to walk, and it'll show me a picture of 12 years ago when the twins were just born, and I just melt every day when I see them. And even though they're so much easier now, actually, I don't have any more diapers to change. I do sleep through the night sometimes. I still miss those times when we were so intimately intertwined, even though it was so much harder then. So this is a natural heart of parents. Even for those who don't believe in God or don't have a spiritual connection to the experience, even for parents who are less than amazing, you show any parent a baby picture of their child, and they will melt. But you just can't pay somebody to do that job. It's really an experience where we connect to God, and it's the only way we can really get through it. Unfortunately, despite how much we love our children and we melt when we see them and we've invested everything for them, every parent still has their regrets. This is a quote, another one from Reverend Moon. The heart of parents is that they feel as if something is lacking, even after they have given. They want to love more, wondering if they have loved enough, even after loving, and feeling regretful and sorry after giving. Because this is the case, that heart can be part of the essential core of eternal love. This is the original motivation at the beginning of love. So, no matter how good of a job we may or may not be doing, every parent has their regrets for things that we did or things that we thought we should have done and we didn't do. For if we didn't spend enough time, we feel like, with our children, or we didn't listen closely enough, for things that we said that we maybe shouldn't have said, or things that we wished we had said. This list can actually go on and on for parents. And despite how adorable and innocent they are as babies, it's actually easier in some ways to love a child as a baby than it is once they start to develop their personality and their opinions and their ideas of what they want to do and where they want to be. This morning, we had discovered some lovely carvings on our table that had been made with a dart. So our child, no matter what we say or how many times we say it, really loves sharing her creativity with our house. And, there's a certain point where we don't have control over them anymore. I've discovered that actually a lot of anxiety and stress, not only in my relationship with my kids, but actually most parents' relationships with their kids at any age, it comes from the parents wanting to see certain outcomes or having certain expectations for their children, and the kids not wanting to be controlled and having their own ideas. This can start at 2 years old, and I don't think it ever ends. So this is a challenge that I think every parent faces at different levels at different times of their life. So what can we do? I feel like we have to go back to God, because God is the original parent. God is the best parent. And what we know about God is that God never forces an outcome. God does teach us. God loves us unconditionally. God shows us the path. He tells us, this is the way to go. If you do this, then you'll get this. If you do that, you'll get that. I think Mike gave a message on this one time. He gave like 20 examples of God saying, if you do this, you'll be blessed, and if you do this, then there's suffering. He told Cain and Abel at the very beginning. He told Cain, if you go with Abel and unite with Abel, you will be blessed. But if you don't, sin is waiting for you, couching at the door. But God didn't take the rock out of Cain's hand. He didn't force the outcome. He loves us, educates us, shows us a path. But in the end, God gives us a choice, and He lets us make that choice. This is one of those examples. It keeps skipping the slide. There it is. Today I am giving you a choice. You can choose life and success or death and disaster. I am commanding you to be loyal to the Lord, to live the way He has told you, and to obey His laws and teachings. You are about to cross the Jordan River and take the land that He is giving you. If you obey Him, you will live and become successful and powerful. This is just one example. But God also gave the commandment in the Garden of Eden to not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That was the first piece of advice that God gave His children. And it was very clear. So we can learn from God that we need to be clear in our education and our expectations. And he let them know the consequences of it as well. For in the day that you eat of it, you will die. But what we notice from the story is that when Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and shared it with Adam, God did not intervene. And many people, including myself, have been like, why? Why not? Everything would be so much better. Everything could have been avoided. Why not, God? Why didn't you step in? And it took me a while to accept the answer to this, but actually in the divine principle, it shares very clearly why God, as a parent, does not control an outcome, manipulate his children, or force them to do anything. If God were to rule directly and control the lives of human beings who are still in the state of immaturity, this would, in effect, grant the authority of a ruler to those who are unqualified to rule. God, the author of the principle, would be disregarding his own principle of creation, which he established in order to enable human beings to inherit the nature of the Creator and govern the creation. Consequently, so actually, it was in order to bless human beings as lords of creation that God had to restrain himself from intervening in the acts of immature human beings as he watched with trepidation their tragic fall. It's hard to accept. But I can see this now, that if God were to intervene, like block Eve from being able to touch the fruit or from sharing it with Adam, then it would be like God is manipulating or controlling or like programming his children to do what he wants them to do. But when our children become robots, we lose the parent-child relationship with them. And so this is I realize it's kind of depressing because we don't like to think of ourselves in this position, having to let our children make mistakes or fall or do something that will damage their life and their future. So, but let's take a look at this from another perspective. While God let Adam and Eve choose to leave, what does God experience when a child turns around and comes back to him? Think about that if you were in God's shoes and you felt like your little heart was walking around outside your body, and then they got their heart broken, or they made a mistake, or they got hurt. But then that child turns around and recognizes, oh, I made a mistake, but I know that you have loved me unconditionally this whole time, and they come back to you. That feeling, I think, is not something you can engineer. It's not something you can force. When somebody chooses of their own accord to love you, that's like the best feeling in the world. And I think, what was the quote that I shared earlier about the parent? If one of their child suffers, the parents' hearts are devastated. But if the situation is resolved, the relief and joy are overwhelming in proportion to the original pain. And I feel that's the same with God. Although Adam and Eve left, when any one person chooses to come back to God, that joy is overwhelming to God. I think we sometimes underestimate the relationship that we have with God. We underestimate that we can give God joy. We're not just like ants walking around and God notices us occasionally. But when we choose God, we can give God immeasurable joy. And so the same with us. Even if we were able to control our children or force an outcome, the compliance that we see is not nearly as fulfilling as the moments when our child chooses to obey or chooses a right path that will lead them to happiness and joy. I think as a parent, that's what we want the most, to see them choosing of their own accord something that will bring them and us and God joy. So if you're struggling because you're worried about the choices your children that will make, you're not alone. God is too. But our job is to love unconditionally and model the way to go. We just last Sunday actually attended Kendra's introduction to her parent seminar that she's starting today, I believe. And I thought it was very, very interesting and very enlightening. And there was actually a lot of parents who were joining this call, and some of them were older. Some of them were in their 60s and their 70s, and they were looking to find a better relationship with their children, who are now grown and have their own children. We never lose the desire to have a deep and fulfilling relationship with our children. And some of these older parents were kind of wondering, is it too late for me? You know, my kids have already grown, they've already made their choices. Is there anything I can do? And I loved Kendra's answer. And she said, absolutely. Because even though you can't change them, each one of us has the power to change myself. And we also underestimate the power of seeing our parents grow and change. She said, each one of us, if we can model unconditional love, if we can model what a relationship with God looks like, this love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength, and if we can model forgiveness, and we show our children that we can change, there's naturally, we are so intertwined with our children, even if they're 40 years old. We are inextricably linked with them. And if we do something different with myself, there will be a difference for the child. And I can say this from personal experience. When I was a kid, especially in high school, I kind of had this image of who my parents were, and that they were a certain way, and that they were always going to be that way with each other and in relationship to me. I was always just going to be like the little kid, and their relationship was stuck where it was, and their relationship with God was a certain way. But actually, I have watched them over the last 20 years change and transform in their relationship, even with each other, which I didn't believe was possible. I've watched their love and trust grow and develop. I've seen my dad transform his relationship with his faith and with God. And I can't tell you what a difference that made for me. And now I also know I don't ever have to be stuck. Because if my parents can change when they're 60 years old, then I can change, and I can do it now. So, in one way, yes, we don't have any control over our children. We can't ensure compliance with good outcomes. But we can be the subject of love. We can be the one who gives first, the one who loves first, just like God. We can give good education. We can model what it is to grow and to make good choices. And a child will never forget that. A child can never truly leave their parents. I know people say, I've divorced my parents, or I've disowned my parents. You can try to. Yeah. Right, Chelsea? You can try. But I think no matter what, there's always that hope in the child's heart that they can be reconnected. And if there's an open door, God can work. So, I just want to come back to the first quote of the message, which I forgot the first sentence of. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. When Sam and our wonderful Solomon Islands brothers and sisters were singing that song about how I think sometimes we feel like we have the weight of the world on our shoulders, and as parents, we carry a special kind of weight that's different from the weight of responsibility in a job or of being a pet owner or of owning a house. There's many responsibilities we have in our life, but a parent carries a special kind of weight. But we don't have to carry it alone. God is also the parent. God knows exactly what kind of a weight you carry. I think sometimes we forget that God has been betrayed. God has been, people have turned their back on God. And it's not necessarily always because we made mistakes. God didn't make a mistake. His children still chose something else. But we can still learn from God's unconditional love, from God's education. And the more we can love God with all of our heart and all of our mind and all of our strength, the more we tie ourselves to God, the better we can be God to our children. So that is my message for today. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you for a beautiful spring day. We're grateful that we can be here as brothers and sisters. As your children, God, we know that when you look at us, you see everything, and you see our challenges, and you see our victories. You know where we're struggling or where we might be suffering, and you're not immune to that, Heavenly Parent. You feel it with us. You carry that on your shoulders too. But I pray that first of all, we can choose you. Despite any difficulties we face, we can choose to honor you, to love you, to comfort you, and be an example of that to our own children and to this world. God, we know that your heart is longing for each child who has strayed and who hasn't yet turned to face you. And many of us experience that in our own life to some degree. But I pray that we can become people who bring you joy and open the path for others to come back to you as well. We want to offer this Sunday to you this week. We want to begin it with you and bring you into our life. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Adonia Hentrick, blessed your family. Amen and adieu. Okay, thank you.